On day 21, we'll be cruising along the Potomac River. We'll load on board the Spirit of Mount Vernon in Washington, D.C., and go to Mount Vernon past Alexandria. First, we'll drive over to the parking garage from our hotel. Then once we've got there and get parked, we will take the streets and walk along them for a couple of blocks until we get to the Spirit of Mount Vernon. Soon after we arrive, it's time to board the boat and get ready to go. Deborah will be staying inside mainly since it's rainy, and I'll be up on top. We'll take the boat and cruise along until we get to Mount Vernon, where we'll depart and see Mount Vernon and then cruise back. There where we get on the boat is the fire and police station. It's rather hazy and cloudy right now, so you can only see half of the Washington Monument, and the Capitol is also in the clouds. As we get started, we pass the War College first. And then we go past Anacostia Naval Air Station, where we will see where the helicopters are kept that the President uses. As you can see, the river is rather high and has come up inside the fencing on the island. Next, we pass Reagan International Airport and watch the airplanes taking off and landing. On our left is the Naval Research Laboratory.
Antenna, and it was originally used in the mid-1950s to measure the distance from the Earth to the Moon. That measurement that was taken in the 1950s was later verified in the mid-1990s and proven to have been accurate within about 9 inches. It was also at this facility that the modern American forms of
And then on our right is Alexandria, the power station, and the modern part of downtown. Now it's time to pass under the Woodrow Wilson Memorial Bridge as we continue to travel southward. As we pass underneath the Woodrow Wilson Bridge, a heavy thunderstorm comes up.
This is going to be one of those sun towers that take your
There's about 1.5 million square feet of convention space.
Because of the heavy rain, we'll not be able to see the National Harbor very well. Seagulls will be following us for the entire trip. Now we'll be passing a community that is full of various famous people, politicians, stars, sports figures, and etc. Fort Washington was built here early in our nation's history to protect Washington, D.C. from an attack from the sea. The area here is very shallow except for the channel near the shore and therefore can be easily protected. In fact, it is so shallow that you can walk from this buoy all the way to the left shore during low tide. And now we've arrived at Mount Vernon up on the hill. Now as we dock at the pier, it's time to depart our ship and head to Mount Vernon. People have been doing this for decades. And today they provide a shuttle bus every 30 minutes that carries you up to the mansion. We will be following this route on the bus as we go up. First, we'll go together to see the Bowling Green and the mansion itself. Then Deborah will go to the museum, and I will go look at the various areas around the mansion outside, including the old tomb and the new tomb, the encampment, and many other places. Let's get started. As we head up to the mansion, we'll be going through the woods, and then we'll arrive at Mount Vernon Estate and Gardens, where we'll look around. This is the home where George Washington lived when he wasn't out serving his country in some capacity. The mansion was sold several times, and then in 1858 it had started to deteriorate, so the Ladies Association bought it and currently own it. First we'll head to the mansion, where we have timed tickets to go in and take a tour. As we stand in line and wait, we see the necessary, or the outhouse. It was even architecturally designed and is a three-holer, so you can be sociable while you sit. Washington only hired gardeners who had been trained in Europe so they could grow any type of plant when he got it. First we'll be visiting the slave quarters, which is connected to the house there at the bottom of the screen. We will go in there and learn a little bit about an orientation for the building.
This building is also original to the property. It was built around 1775. But we do not know much about this building because General Washington didn't really come in here and write down things about where everything was or who stayed here or anything like that. So we know much more about the house itself than this building. But we, as educated guests, have set it up as to how we think it would have been in 1799.
It's now time to enter the mansion and look around there. As you look at the facade of the building, you think that it's made out of stone, but actually there's no stone in it at all. Washington took long pine boards and cut them to look like stone. Then he painted them and threw sand on the wet paint to make it look like stone. As we enter the house, we're not able to take pictures inside, so the pictures you see will be from the internet and from books that I scanned them out of. First we'll head into the music room and look there. Then we'll move on to the formal dining room, the largest room in the building and used for dances and dining with large groups. Next we enter into the game room and then into the family dining room where they ate small meals with the family and close friends. Next comes the office where Washington conducted most of his business. And lastly, we move into the entry hall where one of his most valuable possessions was. This key hanging on the wall was to the Bastille, and it was given to him by Lafayette on one of his visits. Now we move to the second floor to George Washington's bedroom there on the right-hand side. This is where he died in December 14th, 1799. Not too far away was his wife Martha's bedroom. And next we come to the nursery where the children and grandchildren would have stayed. Also on this floor were many other bedrooms, and then moving to the attic, they had 4 bedrooms there also, and you can see what they may have looked like here. After looking upstairs, we now go out the back door and see the Potomac River. On the end of the building is the kitchen, separated somewhat in case of fire. Is this part of the thing I'm not supposed to photograph?
No, you can take it. You got this one?
And now it's time for Deborah and I to go our separate ways. She heads down to the museum. At his death, Washington emancipated all 123 of the slaves he owned. While Deborah's in the museum, I look around at the various buildings around the plantation, including the smokehouse, and then I move to the other side of the mansion complex and look at the buildings we'll find there. First up is the salt house, where salt and other commodities would have been stored for use in the mansion. Then we come to the spinning house. Washington made most of his own clothes and the clothes for his slaves. He selectively bred sheep to produce a better wool, grew flax for clothes, hemp for rope, and experimented with cotton and silk. Here also we find the overseer's house for the plantation. He had 5 farms, and each one of them submitted weekly reports and received annual wages of $133.33 plus board, bed, lodging, and washing. Next we come to the blacksmith, where many different things were made and repaired.
Were they sold with margarine and whatnot?
Oh, that is a mixed bag question. It's very complicated due to legality standards. George Washington did not own all of the slaves that worked here. He had about 317 or so slaves by the 1790s. He owned about 123 of them. It's about 40.
Across the alley from the blacksmith shop is a building that housed many different functions. First we come to facilities to house the various male slaves. About a dozen would live here and eat here when they weren't actually in the fields or some other place working. Next, after the male slaves' quarters, comes the stove room, where they had a fire going constantly to heat the greenhouse. He grew palms, oranges, and lemons and tropical plants there to experiment with. Formal garden. Next comes the shoemaker shop, where every field hand got a new pair of shoes every fall, and also they fixed saddles. They didn't make the family shoes because they were ordered from stores. Last in the building comes the female slaves' quarters, where they and their children slept and lived whenever they weren't actually out working. Children started working at age 13. Children slept on the floor in mats, and about a dozen women slept in this facility. Next, we move all the way across the plantation to the wash house. They had to carry the water from wells, boil it in large pots, and used harsh lye and soap, and also lemons to scrub the cloth. Then once washed, they had to be hung up. They washed for all of the slaves and also for the Washington's family. Next down the hill from the wash house is the carriage house and stables. George Washington broke all of his own horses and was an excellent and bold rider, most people said. He had Magnolia here, an Arabian racehorse, and also Nelson and Blueskin during the Revolutionary War. One of the first vehicles he bought was a riding chair. This two-wheel vehicle was kind of an all-terrain vehicle and could cover terrain that a carriage like this could not cover. Isolated and further down the hill is the old vault, where George and Martha and about 20 other members of their family lived here. They were moved from here to the new vault in 1831. The new vault was more centrally located at the instructions of Washington in his will, and the white markers around it are for various family members. The sarcophagi and graves were moved here in 1831 from the old mausoleum site. Martha's sarcophagi is on the left and George's is on the right. Next up are the animal pens, where he kept his cattle and sheep. Out in front of the mansion on the Bowling Green, they had an encampment, so you could see what it would have been like to have lived in the Army in the Revolutionary War time. Let's listen in on George plan the attack.
And when supplies, wagons, and horses begin to die, that also breeds further disease. So his men, from what I am told from my informants, are in a very bad way here in Yorktown currently, if they cannot be alleviated and taken out. And we hope to prevent that.
Now let's go look at the slave's cabin. Each one of the 5 farms that George Washington owned had an overseer on it, and around his cabin would be 8 to 10 of these slave quarters where they would live. George Washington would tell you first and foremost he was a farmer, and he was a very innovative one at that. Each one of these houses has a tobacco drying house on the end, so that way he could dry his tobacco. But in 1766 he switched from tobacco to wheat, as he thought it had a more future to it and built a 16-sided barn that was 2 stories high. What they would do is, listen.
In which the horses are going around and around the barn, treading over the wheat, and there are gaps in the floor that you can't see here. And below 90% of the seed falls in the gaps in the floor below, 90% of the straw. Let me go ahead and bring these baskets out. What you're seeing down here is, of course, what is falling to the floor below. There's mostly wheat seeds, still about 10% of that straw, but as you can see, much less straw than there is upstairs. So basically, what you're going to start with is you're scooping up this, which is what's on the floor, and then you're going to do riddling, which is what I'm about to do now. And riddling is basically it's working like a sieve. It's sifting out the last 10% of straw that falls, separating the seed from the chaff that everyone hears about. So basically, I'm going to toss it up towards me, and the seed is heavier, so it stays in the basket. The chaff is lighter, so it glides out. You actually really don't need wind for this job. Kind of.
He started a 7-year crop rotation so that he could keep the fertility in his land. Washington owned 10 miles of shoreline with his plantations, and so he had 3 fisheries set up, and he made enough surplus fishing that he could feed his people and also sell some. They made bateau boats to use in this that were 21 feet long and 6 to 8 feet wide. Washington was also innovative in his fences, using many different types. He used the hurdle fence in order to mark off small areas. He used the post and rail fence to mark off the edges of his property. He uses the wattle fence in order to keep in things like chickens and other small animals. And he used the split rail fence that could be easily moved to wherever it needed to be to keep animals in fields. The slaves worked in groups of 8 to 10 people, so they could do various jobs depending upon the season, from planting to harvesting to preserving food, fishing, or whatever it might be. And now it's time to load back on the boat and head back to Washington, D.C. The seagulls are still hanging with us. And now we head upriver past Fort Washington as we head to Washington, D.C. We can see the National Harbor better now that it's quit raining. And soon, we are headed back under the Woodrow Wilson Memorial Bridge. As we get ready to land, the Washington Monument can all be seen now. And there's the Pentagon. Over there across the Potomac River is the Air Force Memorial in Arlington. And now we depart the Spirit of Mount Vernon and head back to our hotel. And this brings us to the end of day 21.